Okay, we're going to call this Sacramento Regional Solid Waste Authority hearing to order on May 9th at 3:08 p.m. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Ashby. Carr. Frost. Here. Kennedy.
Here.
Natoli.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
Gita.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. I'm going to ask the clerk if she could please read the announcement.
This meeting of the Solid Waste Authority is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and the AT&T-Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and webcast at www.metrocable.tv. Today's meeting will replay Sunday, May 12th at 4 p.m. and Monday, May 13th at 4 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board may sign up at the back desk and bring the speaker's card to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record.
Thank you very much. I'll ask the clerk if we could do the first item on the agenda.
Is the general manager's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the SWA board. I have two items today I wanted to talk about. The first is on the slide on the screen. We've been working with Cal Recycle staff. As you know, there are requirements for in 1826 and AB 341 to make a good faith effort on collecting organics commercially. We have been informally notified with informal correspondence that Cal Recycle is not happy with our efforts and are not deeming our efforts to be in good faith. However, staff, we really disagree with that. We've been.
Is your microphone on, Doug?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
That sounds a little better.
You got to
Okay.
lean into those. Staff is not happy.
Staff's not happy with that response. So we have been working with Cal Recycle. We sent off another letter yesterday to point out the things that we are in compliance with. There's no mandatory requirement right now. This is a voluntary program, and so we have plans. And part of our plans are working with the haulers in stakeholder meetings this summer to come up with strengthening the ordinances so that we have a little more control for the generators to sign up for services. And we'll come back to you in the fall, hopefully with ordinance changes to affect that. And that should help satisfy Cal Recycle from whatever their concerns are now. From a technical standpoint, though, we are in compliance with the law and disagree. We are making a good faith effort to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. We have Board Member Natoli here with a question.
Doug, how is it that if you have a voluntary effort at this juncture, and to what points you just made, again, I haven't seen the correspondence, there wasn't copies of that provided unless you just are going to hand those out today, but I guess I would take exception, just as the staff has, is that they can make whether it's informal or formal determination that we're not making a good faith effort when in fact it is voluntary. If it was mandatory and we were not meeting either goals as stated and or requirements, that's a different matter. But so how is it they can come to the conclusion that we're not making a good faith effort?
And that's the same question that we've been asking Cal Recycle staff. And that's the discussion that SWA staff is having with Cal Recycle. Again, we sent another letter yesterday. We don't understand where they're coming from because we have time. I mean, there is a deadline in the future that we have to have this done. We are doing the things that we need to do with our area. We're not the only jurisdiction that they've done this to. They've sent similar letters to most of the entities in the region. But I can't answer your question.
Well, I guess I would just say from what you've told me, and again, not having more printed before us than what's up on the screen, I think it's a bit judgmental to think that whatever agency it is, in this case, obviously, Cal Recycle staff, that they can make a determination and we're not making a good faith effort and not offer some explanation behind that. And then, and secondly, to treat us differently than others in the region who are all going to have to meet those the requirements at the juncture on which the law kicks in. I guess I don't know what correspondence you sent, but I certainly would want to make sure that the objections, again, are respectful, but they're also considerate of where we are in this community, working together with certainly the jurisdictions that comprise the SWA, but also with our haulers and those who assist us in that regard, obviously in providing service to the people that we all work for. I find this a bit objectionable, and I wanted to state so. And maybe you could provide copies of that correspondence so we can see exactly what they've said and what we're responding to.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I don't know if that good points, Board Member Natoli. I think, and I don't know if it would make sense or there's more staff work to be done, but a request for Cal Recycle staff to present before this board so that we can have a conversation between our cities and counties about what the state is asking the local jurisdictions to do. I think I'd like to see whether that is an appropriate request, but I'll ask staff to come back to see so that they can better articulate that position.
Okay.
And is that the end of your oral report?
I had one other point. Today is the day we were expecting to get responses to the Organics RFP. If you remember, we partnered with the City of Sacramento and the City of Folsom on a rather large RFP trying to find a home for all of our tonnage. The responses were due back today. I'm pleased with the responses so far. The cutoff was at 3 o'clock, and I don't have a total count for you. But we did get a number of responses, so I'm pleased with that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sloan. I think this is a good example where we could use economy of scale to reduce our costs on this, and the fact that we have the City of Folsom along with the county and city going at this makes it easier on all of us. Maybe if we can convince a couple of these other cities to come on in and reduce the cost for everyone, I think would be good as well. Thank you. That concludes your
It does
report.
conclude my report.
Good. We'll go on to the next item.
Your next item are your consent items. Items 2 through 4 are before you for approval.
Is there a motion from the board?
Move consent.
It's been moved by Board Member Kennedy. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Natoli. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, measure passes.
Your next item is item number 5, is Sacramento County withdrawal from SWA.
So on April 23rd, the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors did pass a resolution that's included in your package with the intent to withdraw from the SWA. We are
Microphone.
Sorry. We are working with the City of Sacramento. We have a meeting scheduled next week to go through the process initially in terms of what the SWA does, how we're going to break out the various documents. The city has sent in a request for a lot of documentation, which we're prepared to share with them. You will find in your budget that there is money allocated. In the budget request, there's money allocated for SWA staff and or a consultant. We're leaving that up to them. And we're working on a 2-year time frame and trying to move this along as quickly as we can from our standpoint, because there's a lot of moving parts to it, and we want to make sure that city staff is fully apprised of what's entailed with the SWA.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sloan. I've got, do we have any members from the public on this item?
Renee?
No.
No. Oh, we've got a couple coming down here.
No.
And then, Board Member Tolley, would you like to?
I want to just ask a question.
Yeah,
Did
we'll-
the corrected resolution get forwarded? Because the packet that I had still had the incorrect resolution relative to the vote that was taken at the board on this matter.
Correct.
It reflected the aye vote on my part, which was 180 degrees from what I voted.
Let's see. Let me see what I have here. Copy this. Oh, thank you. While we look at the record here to make sure that the appropriate information is in the packet, we'll go ahead and go. We've got two members here to speak. We've got Mr. Dave Sikich and then Mr. Mike Lean.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Sikich with Atlas. Been providing waste and recycling collection in Sacramento for over 20 years. And I'm just very concerned about the SWA, the county choosing to pull out a SWA at this time. I think now more than ever with the aggressive mandates coming down from the state that we just heard about and the organics and the AB 341, that this is the time for regional cooperation. Our programs are really only as successful as our neighboring jurisdictions are, and we've had the benefit, at least since I've been in the business for the last 20 years, of having the city and the county, which represents the largest jurisdictions, all on the same page. And I'm very concerned as we start to drift. And I've heard testimony that we are hopeful that we're still going to have regional cooperation and we can do that as separate entities. But historically, what my experience has shown me that, you know, jurisdictions will tend to drift over time, and it just gets much harder to be successful as we try to meet these mandates that the states come down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sikich. Mr. Lean.
I think this will come up.
Yes.
There we go.
I think they set it for my height.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Mike Lean, L&D Landfill. My family's been in the landfill business here in Sacramento since 1968, and I think we're one of the few people who were in the room when SWA was created. And needless to say, I think you all know that we're not very excited about this, and I'll keep it short and sweet and not repeat myself very much. And I'll also try and hit some items related to the next agenda item at the same time. In reviewing the budget, I was intrigued by the fact that there was $250,000 in last year's budget that went towards the organics processing bids that were due today, and another $100,000 in the year coming up budget. And this is what I think SWA should be doing. And the talk about economies of scale and having, the city of Folsom participating along with the city and the county would be the direction that we'd like to see SWA going. I agree with the things that Dave mentioned before me. I think they're good examples. They're further on the budget. There's $300,000 in the budget for city staff and another $200,000 in the budget for a consultant to help in this breakup. I won't be so simplistic as to suggest that how those monies are going to be recouped in this cost-saving effort, but we, in fact, don't think it's going to be cost-saving, and ultimately, we're going to have more government, bigger government rather than less government, and in fact, it's going to be more expensive. And I'll add to that, and with that, I'll leave it there unless there's any questions, because I'd be repeating myself from what you've all heard, probably more than you already want to hear it.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lean, and yes, for the majority of this board, this is probably deja vu all over again, but I think it's worth a conversation here. I've got Board Member Natoli here.
Just a question. Mike raised it. We haven't yet called the budget item, but if in fact we are budgeting $500,000 in order to facilitate the bust up of this entity, I guess I would just question the wisdom of that. Obviously, we as the Board of Supervisors, and I respect obviously the majority of the board's decision about indicating the intent to withdraw. But I would just say that wasn't part of the discussion that when it was before us 2 weeks ago at the Board of Supervisors. I think there was a recognition there would be some costs associated, certainly with the city's work. But if, in fact, we're now budgeting $200,000 for this entity to then decide how we're going to bust it up, and so we can gain an additional staff person or staff person's dedicated services at the county end of it, I guess I just question the wisdom of that at this point in time. And I think it is a proper discussion for this board because those monies are derived from franchise fees on the haulers and those that are franchised through this entity. And, again, we can talk about the wisdom of, of keeping this together or not, but that seems to me from the standpoint of the efficiencies goes to the point that I think I've heard both Mr. Sikich and Mr. Lean make, certainly before our body and this body as well. And again, I don't want to jump ahead, Mr. Chair, but that to me is a relevant item. I mean, part of the discussion we've had at this board over time has been how we utilize the dollars, obviously certainly meeting the mandates that are required by virtue of what the legislature deems as being the law, but certainly as we then implement this at this level. And if in fact this wind down, as it's characterized, is going to cost us $500,000 of money that could either be dedicated or devoted to what we've set as priorities, certainly from a standpoint of the work that this body has done, but also dealing with neighborhood issues. And I know we reserved actually about $1 million earlier or late last year, and that's probably a point of discussion with the budget in the next item as well. It just seems to me, though, that we're going to embark on this effort, and I will just say that one of the discussion points that before our board is to get some touchbacks. Obviously, Doug has been charged with that. But if we're going to go down this road and begin expending hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think that really sets in motion then a pathway which will be very difficult to reverse if, in fact, this body and or either of the two parent bodies, the city or the county, would intend to maybe rethink the decision. And so I appreciate you pointing that out, Mike, because I think it's very important because those dollars are going to come. They're precious dollars. And I think what was sold to us, at least in part, was that we were going to see additional efficiencies over time, and somehow the Board of Supervisors would have better control of those dollars and staffing that goes behind it. And to me, this is an effort that we might be better advised to take that $500,000 devoted to the priorities of implementing what's going to be the law, but secondly, of doing some of the neighborhood activities that are important for illegal dumping, litter removal, and dealing with blight and zoning issues that a good part of this funding goes for on an annual basis to both of our jurisdictions.
Thank you, Board Member Natoli. Are there other board members signed up to speak on this item? If not, I think I'll make a comment on this myself as well. I agree with Board Member Natoli, and we may be in the minority on this item. But I think the benefits, particularly for jurisdictions that are areas that are adjacent to each other with city and county, I think this ability to be able to work and address those issues, and also for the businesses that have to coexist between city and county boundaries, making it a seamless interaction between the business, the hauler, and their government entity, I think is a positive piece. I think we'll have a conversation on the next item about what we do with budget. And at the very least, I think from the concern from a city standpoint is we don't want to be caught flat-footed if per se one of the parties wants to engage in a divorce. We want to make sure that we're being prepared for whatever the future is. But I do see the benefit of having the Solid Waste Authority. And I think the only thing that I would ask for Mr. Lean before he leaves is if in the ability to deliver good services, how could moving forward, given the fact that there's an interest in pursuing a separate form of government, would impact the industry?
Well, I think that the best example that I can give you is to take our site, and we have today somewhere between 70 and 85% of what comes into our site comes from the city and the county together, and it's generally speaking about a 50-50 split. And and we have a series of reporting quarterly reporting and documents that, quarterly reporting that we need to do and certifications that we need to do that the SWA handles today. And so we're dealing with one entity instead of two. And when we get to where we're dealing with two entities, it won't be the same, it'll be more expensive, and it'll take more time. And, you know, the best example I can give in terms of this is that when Citrus Heights left the SWA and Elk Grove and Rancho Cordova chose not to join the SWA, then the talk was that those entities would mirror the SWA. Well, they don't, and they don't even mirror each other. And as a and we have a certain reporting in terms of those that is different, and it adds a different level. And our job in terms of the reporting is much more difficult than it is for the haulers. Dave Sikich could speak to it better in terms of what he has to do with those different entities for the recycling requirements and the franchisee agreements, but they're not the same. I also would add in terms of, hopefully that answered your question, I'd add a couple of things, and that's that I want to make it clear that from the standpoint, if this is in fact going to happen, that the allocation of these funds, I think, is something that's needed, because the city needs to be ready, and they're not ready right now. And so the question isn't necessarily the allocation of the funds, it's more, is this the best way to use the funds? And are we better off with one group or two? And you know, as I said before, I actually saw the city of Folsom. You know, I wasn't very close until I was straightened out by staff in terms, because we're not bidding on the RFP that was due at 3 o'clock today. But we were looking, from my viewpoint, I was hoping that would be a reason that the city of Folsom would join the SWA, as opposed to one that, as opposed to breaking it up. And your staff has set the RFP up so that there are multiple options available depending on how the directions go. So that's set. And then the last thing that I would add quickly is that the, oh wait a minute, it's gone.
Well, that's okay. It happens to me quite often. Well, thank you, Mr. Lean. I appreciate your time here. I've got Board Member Peters here.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk for a moment about the issue when it came in front of the Board of Supervisors. We were informed that this organization was originally formed to combine the garbage collection for both the City of Sacramento and the county, which I wasn't here in 1992. I wasn't even thinking about it in 1992, but it never happened. So I would say, you know, the purpose of the organization in the first place has changed. It was discussed with both county and city staff and members of their jurisdictional boards. There was a long and robust discussion at the Board of Supervisors about several cities had dropped out and the prices may have changed, but that it was doable, and we felt that it would be more responsive to requests from constituents and members of our individual boards and councils, not to have to go through the extra step of working through the combined organization. So there were numerous reasons to do it, and I'm sorry if they didn't get to you to discuss it with you, but I know that they talked to city staff and a majority of the members of the city council. So just wanted to be sure you knew that there was reached out. So. Well,
that to be clear, Board Member Peters, it's not that they didn't talk to us. It was, and I do want to thank.
Just one more thing.
Yeah,
in that discussion, and because of it, that's why we delayed the for up to 2 years, 2.5, 2 years, or so that the City of Sacramento staff could get, and probably county staff could get organized enough to make it a seamless transition. So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, and I don't want to. I don't want to make this sound like I'm admonishing the county staff or the county's point of view, but I think 3 weeks to notify members of the city council for something as significant as an item like this, when in fact we have significant potential state mandates coming to us, I think is insufficient amount of time, but I do appreciate the conversation and the recognition of how long it could take if the separation of the jurisdiction was to occur, to give the appropriate amount of time. So, and to that, I do want to commend our board supervisor chair on that part there. And in fact, I'm going to ask our city staff. I think Jerome Council is there. If you don't mind coming to the podium. So, Mr. Counsel, and I think because this is an important thing, since we have both business and the haulers here along with them, how soon were you notified that this potential action would come to head prior to the county board? And then second, what do you think is a realistic time frame to be able to have the city prepared to meet the demands of both of the state regulations and what the clients are going to need? So those are two questions.
I don't remember the date exactly, but I think Doug and I had a conversation back in March about their intent to move in this direction. At the Board of Supervisors, I think I asked for a 24-month time frame to be able to stand up a regulatory office and be able to, feel like, I have my hands around all the total scope and scale of what this means. I did ask for, maybe a consultant to come in and kind of evaluate the program so that we have a clear understanding of what we're getting into here. It's, in some terms, I think it was kind of oversimplified at how this would go and how smoothly it would go. But I think if the consultant came in and kind of gave us a total breakdown of what our responsibilities are, how to separate the entities, I think I would be comfortable with that, be able to staff an office and be able to meet all the requirements of the program there.
Very good, thank you. And I've got Board Member Frost here.
I wonder if you, when the board was discussing this, we kind of had a conversation around the state mandates that are coming up and the fact that we're reaching out to other jurisdictions to partner for possibility of partnering. So I wonder if, Doug, you can speak to, how that would work if SWA doesn't exist, because in my understanding was that with or without SWA, we were going to have a huge lift on coming into compliance in the time frame that the state gave us, and that it wasn't necessarily going to be within the SWA mission to cut, all of it wasn't going to fit into SWA, so that we were still going to be working with other jurisdictions, but differently. So whether or not we have SWA, my understanding is that we're all going to be working together still in some form or fashion. And I wonder if you can, because I think the franchise haulers are concerned about maybe having to work with several different entities on one thing and that it might be different for all of them. But there are efficiencies for partnering under one agreement that everybody signs individually with them without it being different. I mean, that's the way I kind of envisioned it. Is that how you envision it?
Yes, and there's really two parts to this. One is the residential piece. So on the residential side, there is, at least on the county side, there is a huge lift there because right now we're looking at, we are required under 1383 January 1st of 2022 to collect organic materials from residents. At this point, it looks like that would be taking your organic food waste from the refuse can and placing that into the green waste can and then having to pick that up weekly. That is, for us, it is a huge endeavor because on the residential side, because we don't pick up the green waste weekly, so we're going to have to add routes to accomplish that, assuming that we're still picking up the refuse weekly and the recycling every other week. The city actually picks up their green waste weekly, so they don't have as big of an issue there, which is fortunate for them. And there are some rules on 1383 that do cover the commercial, but from my perspective, the biggest push there is on the residential side. On the organic side for commercials, you have 1826, which we've been talking about, and that's really where the businesses are required to remove the organics from their waste stream, and that's the program that our franchise haulers offer now, and we're going to try and reinforce that the generators have to participate in the plan to comply with the law. That's the piece that Cal Recycle is concerned that we're not meeting the good faith effort because we don't have enough businesses signed up for that. From the commercial standpoint, it's a program that, as we have the ordinances in place now, we intend to strengthen those in the fall. Whatever the SWA ordinances are, we intend as SWA staff and as county staff to also work on the 1383 ordinance changes so that information is also provided to the city staff as they work through these issues, so that we jointly are working on that. When it comes to organic materials and the recycling, we are trying to form renew partnerships with all the entities in the county. If you think about the curbside recycled materials and the need to have a consistent plan throughout the county in terms of a pizza box, is it recyclable, is it not? Do programs, we want to make sure if we can that all of the programs in the county accept all the same kind of materials, and it's something that staff is going to be working with the cities of Citrus Heights and Rancho and Elk Grove, their franchise hauler, Republic Services, trying to get a consistency throughout the region so that we all have the same program. Because one of the things we want to do is try and marry all of our marketing and educational money and get the biggest bang we can. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're on this block that's in the city or this block that's in the county. What you would put in the blue carts, what you would put in the organic cart would be the same thing. So there are partnerships there that we are really trying hard to develop. In terms of MOUs, assuming that one of the organics facilities is going to be the county transfer station, we would be doing, in my mind, we would be doing an agreement with the City of Sacramento for their, the whole intent here was, can we provide a place where both the city and the county residential organics trucks can go, where the commercial trucks can go, drop that material off in a central place and get it transferred off. And that was one of the goals of the organic partnership that we did.
Great, thank you. Did Board Member Frost, did it answer your question?
Yeah, and I know we put a 2-year timeline on it, but we said we could come back and revisit it if we needed to take longer, or if we need more time. So that's the way I understood it.
That's correct.
Good. Thank you, Board Member Frost. Board Member Natoli.
Yeah.
Doug, if I could, just questions on the staff report here kind of falls onto the responses to Supervisor Frost's inquiries. On the discussion for today's staff report, we talk about the new commercial solid waste ordinances for both the county and the city. And I guess I want to get an understanding, again, for the item that follows this. Is that what the additional funding will be allocated for staff work, both at the city and I guess at the county level? Is that the $500,000, the $300,000, $200,000 reference?
So we'll jump ahead a little bit into
Yeah,
that
well, I'm just
discussion.
waiting to understand it because you just talked
Want to
about
read
here.
that item so we can talk about it at the same time? And
I'll ask council here. Is that appropriate, or?
I think staff can answer briefly and then save the details for the discussion under the next item.
Yeah.
So the intent is we basically added 2 line items to the budget. One was for $300,000, and the intent there is for that is to fund city staff in the hiring of that staff. And so that dollar amount is sufficient for approximately 2 full-time equivalent staff people. But with that, we also recognize that there's a certain amount of time it will take to hire that staff. So that amount assumes that staff would be available for a full year, when the reality is it's very likely that we would end up spending less than that, or the city would, in getting staffed up. But the hope is that by a year from now, that those people would be on board, the city would have them hired and working on commercial recycling issues. The second line item is a $200,000 item for consulting services. Now, we haven't finalized exactly what those services would be, but it is envisioned that they would include assisting both the city and the county with formulating new code. And that effort's going to be a little bit more complicated than just transferring over code from the current SWA code, and that we'll want to integrate the language that is finalized ultimately from SB 1383, and so there's quite a bit of language in that. So we've got that. And then there's other systems that we might need to establish to support that regulatory effort. So there's a lot of information that needs to be provided.
Thanks, Tim. So let me just ask my question. This goes to bullet number 1 under discussion on item 5, but obviously has the budgetary implications. Would those dollars otherwise, in large part, not have to be budgeted for? The $200,000 for consulting, in light of some of the legislation's coming on board, I assume we have to do some of that work under the SWA umbrella or flag.
I think that's a reasonable assumption, that while we probably would not have hired staff as soon, either on the SWA side or the city side, we would have been doing that in the future to support regulatory compliance.
Okay.
And then the consulting piece, it might be a little more robust than what it would have been, but again, we're accelerating kind of our work on the regulatory piece.
Okay. Thank you for that. So then I guess the question that follows on, it goes to the testimony we heard today and obviously heard before our board. With regards to the regulated industry, over the years, irrespective of whether we've evolved from what maybe was envisioned in 1992 to this very moment, that we've increased the franchise fee. We've had many discussions about the utilization of the franchise fee and how it's distributed. Obviously, under previous with Citrus Heights and obviously Elk Grove and Rancho Cordova having broken out as to how that distribution would be divided between the city and county, and we've had robust discussions about that. My question is that what sort of weight did we give and maybe this is for SWA versus with the county or city staff, as to what was said here today, that by what we're going to do, and again, there's a lot of, we hope we can, and we would like to work closely with the two staffs, and I trust we will do that in trying to have ordinances that mirror one another. But we all heard what Mr. Lean said when there was a previous separation, when Citrus Heights went their own way. And so those are added costs that get passed on to customers. They don't just get passed on to the haulers or those that are doing the landfill disposal. And so we will require that either as a city or county or certainly under SWA. What sort of consideration was given to that as to, back to the point of efficiency, but who's going to pay that? Ultimately, the tab's going to be paid by the customers, either by the businesses and or the people who frequent those businesses in this community. And if you have disjointed approaches, again, respecting the jurisdiction's ability to do that, was that a part of the consideration, Doug? I mean, you've been in this business for a long time. Is that, that's not the sole reason to keep something in place is because you get efficiencies for the regulated industries, but those regulated industries are the ones who provide the services to ultimately the customers, the people that we all represent. So I'm trying to get some sense about that, because if there are additional costs, they're going to get passed on.
I would answer that currently we have 3.5 full-time or 3.5 staff members at SWA staff. There's a few of us that are involved, but out of the 3.5. So if you just took today's existing code and you split the two organizations, the revenue is about 50-50. I don't remember what the business count is, how close that is to being 50-50. But my guess is right now, if we were to split it, I would see 2 staff people at the city and 2 at the county, handling the same commercial work that we have today. So in my world, that because you can't really have a half a body, you'd have two full-time people. So for my world, that is adding a half a body into the SWA staff that we wouldn't have done if we kept the SWA together. That going forward, as Tim alluded to, though, there are new requirements coming down for 1383. There's work that will have to be done with 1826, some reporting and things. Whether you split the SWA or you keep it together, we would end up having to add staff anyway to handle all of those materials. So you could see down the road where you would have 3 and 3, but in my mind, that's because you would have 6 SWA staff, whether you have the organization together or apart.
And just to follow on, though, again, it was your bullet, I'm going after your discussion. We talk about, currently SWA, and we spent a lot of time a number of years ago on the construction and demolition materials and coordination on that and how that was going to be dealt with and accounted for under previous statutes at the state level. And what this bullet says, it just says an agreement could be arranged between the city and county for continued management of this program. So if it isn't, what's that leave in limbo then? I guess I'm curious as what does that equate to in either lack of coordination and or costs associated, again, regulated industry, but certainly get passed on to customers somewhere along the line?
My intent is that we are going to come to an agreement with the city. I mean, we will, in my mind, we're going to make an offer to continue the program the way it is. And have an MOU with the county folks and the city to provide the same service. If the city wants to do that program on their own, that would be up to them in that process. But we certainly are going to offer that up, and we meet with city staff officially next week to kick off the transition.
Okay, so I recognize the time frame here, but so what with regards to, with the blending that occurs and the accounting for the waste streams, does that accrue benefit to this region, to the 1.5 million, 1.25 million folks that the 2 jurisdictions represent? Is there benefit because you get some of these, I think, again, balancing that goes on or not? Is there something to that from the standpoint of county, city, or both?
I can't picture that there's a major difference. We're still going to have, each entity still has to report to the state. And in fact, some of the reporting under 901, some of the generators are reporting directly to the state now, and they're not even, they won't be engaging SWA staff or our department as they were in the past. So
you don't see any particular positive or minus?
I don't see
that?
this as a
wash.
Big factor.
Okay, one other question that very quickly.
And
again,
we're going to lose quorum in about 10 minutes. So
anyway, this is to the bullet points, and this is where, since it's been termed a divorce, somebody's going to end up with a house and somebody's going to end up with a car.
Well, sometimes you get both.
Oh, do you? Well, I didn't know that. I guess you do. I never had to go through that, fortunately. So, So on the assets and liabilities, we have to go through this dissolution. So
right.
What does that require?
Well, we have a very simple balance sheet, so to speak. We don't own assets. We don't own vehicles, equipment, or anything else. So basically what we're going to be doing...
So we get the car and the house, as Ms. Peters said? Is that what they
no, we're splitting it pretty much 50-50. Now, we do have money in the reserve account that was... we had money there before. We added money to it last fall. And that would be the type of thing that will get split up at the end.
Yeah, with the percentages probably.
now we're getting into communal property here.
If it's... That's correct.
Who gets the kids?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Board Member Tolle. This is a receive and file, no action. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to move on to the budget here, and because we're going to lose folks in about 8 minutes. If the clerk could read the item.
Your item number 6 is adoption of fiscal year 2019-20 proposed budget.
Do we have a brief, very, very brief?
Very brief. So this year's budget is very similar to last year's with the exception of a couple items. One, the revenue, we've projected an increase in revenue from about 5.7 million to 6.5 million coming in. As we had already discussed, we included monies for city staff and consulting to help with issues associated with the SWA withdrawal and setting up systems to support commercial recycling efforts. Other changes, we've added some money for EMD because we expect an increased budget requirements from them related to inspection of commercial businesses. And we have decreased the amount that we had in our illegal dumping cleanup fund to essentially cover existing contracts and commitments we've made to date in those areas. So contracts with the Conservation Corps, P-bids will remain.
Great. Well,
And then just one last item is this is a draft budget and it does not include fund balances from this current fiscal year in it yet, but based on our current spend rate, that unspent balance is likely to be in the 1.5 million range. So distribution to the city and county are likely to be around $2.1 million.
okay. And so this, when we vote on this budget, we will vote on a separate budget in the fall after everything is approved?
That is correct, so that we'll have a final budget with all those numbers included in it.
In the fall?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Mr. Lean to come up here. I think he signed up to speak, and if he could be brief, because we're going to lose a quorum in a couple of minutes. Did you need to speak, Mr. Lean?
I covered it already.
Covered it already. Fantastic. I like that. I'm going to make a motion here to approve the budget. I'm going to add some changes here from the city's portion of the franchise distribution. I'm going to ask that we move 375 back to the illegal dumping category. I recognize that you guys reduced that, but we still have quality of life cleanup issues. I know both Mr. Kennedy and I have been receiving issues about Stockton Boulevard. And from the recent report that we got from Public Works about people using the, and solid waste about not knowing about the resources available for cleanups and dumping and whatnot, I'd like to also move from the city's portion 100 over to Section 7 for outreach in the outreach area to make sure that we can have the SWA communicating with folks and being able to access that. So with that, I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Great. Thank you very much. That's our last item. Is there any other items from the clerk?
No.
Okay, good. We're adjourned at 3:55.